This video is about the closing process, the actual logistics of closing a home in the state of Florida, and all of the individual steps that we go through, from wiring funds to doing re-inspections, final walkthroughs, and the contingencies that we have in place to enforce that the closing goes smoothly. So let's jump right into it. This is a really exciting time because you're getting super close to your closing, and there may be a number of questions that you have about how this is all going to work out. So I prepared a quick little video for you to talk about the process of what it looks like to go through closing. Most of the activity in the transaction happens on the front end of it, and then there's a quiet period of time. Prior to closing, there's a number of things that are going to fall into line, and let's just start with the final walkthrough. So you're a buyer and you're purchasing a property in Florida and you're paying cash. Maybe there were some repairs that needed to be completed. We will want to verify whether those repairs were done. So depending on the extent of the repairs, we may have our home inspector come back in and pay them an additional fee to come in and re-inspect those items which the seller has agreed to address. You have a right to do that, and I recommend doing that, as soon as the repairs are completely done, but at least a week to 5 days prior to closing, so that if anything was not done properly, they still have time to get someone in there to get it fixed, or for us to come to an agreement that title company could hold back some funds for it to be done after closing if that's the case. We have a lot of safeguards in place to protect your transaction, and whatever could occur has happened before, so there are a lot of guardrails there in the contract for contingencies if things like this come up. After any repairs are done and we have confirmed that the repairs are completed, if that applies, then typically leading into the closing, you're going to have the title company reach out to you, and they will send you wiring instructions and your balance to close. At this point, they have already sent it to us as your agents in order to review it and make sure that it abides by the terms of the contract. And if there's an HOA, they've already gotten the estoppel from the HOA, and they're prorating all of those expenses on the closing statement. Now, it's very, very, very important that you're careful with the wiring instructions. You cannot wait until the day of closing to think about how you're going to go about wiring funds. I had a client who was told by his bank in New York that he had to physically come into the bank branch in order to have his funds wired. And even though we got that resolved by escalating it to top management, it still put a lot of undue stress upon him to have to go through all of that at the last minute. I had another client who thought that they could sit at the closing table and pull up their laptop and go on Bank of America's website and initiate a wire transfer at that time. And I don't know about the Bank of America banking practices, but I've never had that happen or work out for anybody, because typically there is a delay unless you're going into the bank or you're having the bank authorize that wire transfer. There can definitely be a delay, and you definitely don't want to do the ACH transfer where Bank of America issues a check to someone. So the funds need to be wired to the title company for closing. They can't do any other form of payment but a wire that's direct. And you want to be extremely careful with these instructions. So the best recommendation is the wiring instructions come directly to you from the title company, either by email, or you go and physically pick up a piece of paper from them that has their wiring instructions. Now, those instructions are never going to change. If you get some sort of an email saying, hey, this is the title company and we're going to change the closing date and we need you to wire the funds early, or we need you to wire it to this other address, it could be someone spoofing you where they have a fake email address that looks very similar to the title company's email address, and they could be trying to steal your money. So you want to be extremely careful. Make sure that when you get the wiring instructions directly from the title company, not through anyone else, that you take those and print them out, and you take them to your bank, and you go to the teller or your banker and you tell them, I want to initiate a wire, but I want to call the title company first, and we want to verify with the title agent the account number and the wiring instructions. And you're already going to have a point of contact at that title company, someone that has been sending you correspondence, you've talked to them on the phone, you've sent them paperwork, and so you'll be on a first name basis at that point. You'll call them up, hey, this is so-and-so, I'm at the bank, I'm just calling to verify the wiring instructions. and they will verify them with you, and then you can have that peace of mind that you're wiring your money to the right place. Can't stress that enough, how important that is to be careful about wiring instructions. I've never had a client that has ever been frauded, but I've heard stories from other people, and so I always really try to drive this home that it's so critical. So you have initiated your wire for your balance to close, and it goes to the title company. Now the title company is going to receive that pretty quickly. Sometimes, depending on your bank, it might need to go through a central clearinghouse, but typically it gets received within an hour of when you have initiated it. There are certain wire cutoff times, which I believe is 3:00 p.m. for an outgoing wire. If the wire has been initiated prior to 3 p.m., then the receiving bank could receive it after 3 p.m., but you can't initiate an outgoing one after 3 p.m. Eastern, from what I understand. And so typically, you want to do this the day before closing, so that on the morning of closing, you're not trying to go to the bank and run around and do all these things at the last minute. Okay, so the last step prior to closing is to do our final walkthrough. The contract states that we can do this the day before closing or the morning of closing. And if there was something major, then we'll want to do, a second, some sort of reinspection, or do it the day before. But most of the time, we'll do the final walkthrough right before we go to closing, so we can maximize our time, and because we're not anticipating any problems. So let's say we have a closing at 10 a.m. We'll plan to meet at the property to give ourselves, 30 minutes to an hour, and then the drive time to the title company. So usually we'll meet, at 8:30 a.m. or 9 a.m. and then jot right over to the title company for your closing. When we're at the closing table, then we'll review the closing statement, which has all of the credits and debits, and it'll add up to that balance to close that you have wired in for your closing. We will talk about a few things like, homesteading your property, and give you information about that. And also, leading up to the closing, you'll get some emails from me about transferring over your utilities and making sure that those are all set. Sometimes, like the water company doesn't want to transfer the service until you have a deed in hand. So in that case, like my title company, they'll fax over the deed to the water company so they can get it initiated and make it easier for you. Not all title companies do that, but the title company will assist in any way that we can in getting those things done. And you technically take possession of the property when funds are dispersed according to the contract, unless something else has been agreed upon. And so if we do have a last minute problem that comes up and we need to work through it, then we'll say, okay, time out, we're not dispersing funds, we're not taking possession until we can work through this problem. And there's no shortage of potential things that could come up, and that's why you have real estate agents to be there by your side and come up with creative solutions and roll up our sleeves and get it done. Yesterday, I went to a final walkthrough, and their house was infested with fleas. Yes, fleas. The life of a luxury real estate agent is so glamorous, let me tell you. There were fleas, and the seller thought, he didn't tell us about the fact that he had some fleas there 3 weeks ago and thought it was an isolated incident and treated it, but clearly did not treat it properly. And of course, my clients did not want to move into the house until the fleas were mitigated. And of course, I was not enjoying the fact that I had walked through this house and had fleas on my body, which was a first for me, and how paranoid I was about that and all the precautions I had to take and canceling my appointments and all of that good stuff, okay? But we were able to collaborate, get a licensed and insured exterminator out there that day, signed an addendum to get it mitigated, and came up with a contingency plan on how we were going to ensure that it was treated properly before this family moved into the house. So sometimes there are unexpected things that do come up at the last minute, so it's always good that whenever possible that you're taking action on things right away, and we're clearing any roadblocks out of the way in advance. So that's why it's a great idea to get your funds wired in advance. Don't worry, the title company is not going to release them until we let them know that there was a satisfactory walkthrough. All of these things that we do are to protect you and to enforce the contract and all of the provisions that are built into that contract to protect you.